She was not a warship, nor a vessel of grand luxury. The Andes was a working ship, stout, purposeful, and built to carry goods across the Caribbean Sea. Her steel hull was painted a weathered black, streaked with rust that trailed like tears down her sides. And in the early months of 1905, she cut across the waves like a slow-moving shadow. Her captain, whose name history has almost lost, was a man of order and reputation. A man said to have salt water for blood and eyes as sharp as the horizon's edge. Crewmen spoke of him with a mix of respect and quiet fear, not because he was cruel, but because he carried a certain stillness, as though he knew storms before the clouds ever formed. On that fateful voyage, the Andes left port carrying a hold full of cargo meant for the islands, crates of flour, salted meat, barrels of molasses, and something else, something never listed in the official logs. Some swore it was gunpowder. Others whispered of gold hidden in false-bottomed crates. But the most persistent rumor spoke of a shipment of illegal explosives, meant for revolutionaries somewhere across the sea. The crew had grown restless. The tropical heat pressed down on the decks, turning each shift into a trial of endurance. Below, in the airless belly of the ship, the smell of oil, sweat, and something acrid lingered, sharp enough to sting the back of the throat. For weeks, the Andes pushed on, the steady beat of her engines thudding like a giant's heart. By day, the waters glittered under the sun. By night, the sea became a black expanse, broken only by the slow sweep of the stars above and the pale light of the ship's lamps. But something in the air began to change. Small things, at first. A hatch that wouldn't stay shut. Tools gone missing from the engine room. The faint scent of smoke, dismissed as a trick of the mind. The captain grew quieter with each passing day. His logbook entries became shorter, tighter, as though the pen in his hand weighed 100 pounds. And though no one dared ask, the crew knew he felt it too, that unshakable sense that the Andes was carrying more than just cargo. She was carrying a fate. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in the still, dark waters of Deep Bay, that fate was waiting for her. The morning of the fire began like any other. The sea was calm, the sunlight pale, and the smell of salt carried lazily across the deck. The crew went about their duties, coiling rope, checking rigging, swabbing the boards slick with early dew. But in the dark belly of the Andes, trouble had already begun. At first, it was nothing more than a thin ribbon of smoke curling upward through the cracks in the deck boards, so faint it could be mistaken for steam from the boilers. The heat below grew by the hour, clinging to the skin like a fever. Some of the men spoke of hearing muffled pops, wood splitting, or perhaps something else. The engineer swore he smelled burning canvas. The captain, summoned from his quarters, descended into the cargo hold. When he returned, his face was pale, his jaw set in a grim line. No one ever knew exactly what he saw down there. Some claimed it was a crate blown open, its contents, black powder, spilling across the floor. Others said he found barrels sweating oil, their metal bands glowing faintly from the heat. He gave no explanation, only orders. Clear the deck, prepare the lifeboats, and keep your mouth shut. But by then, the fire was alive. It began deep within the heart of the ship, hidden beneath planks and tarps, feeding on oil, wood, and whatever secret cargo was tucked away. The smoke thickened until the air burned the throat and eyes. Then came the first blast. It was not large enough to tear the hull, but it was enough to shake the Andes from bow to stern. Men stumbled across the deck, some clutching their ears, others shouting over the rising roar from below. The heat radiating from the hold was so intense the iron fittings on the hatch began to glow. The captain's voice cut through the chaos like a whip crack. All hands, abandon ship. The crew scrambled, lowering lifeboats into the rolling sea as the fire burst upward in a plume of black and orange. Barrels exploded, sending splinters and shards of metal screaming through the air. Some men leapt straight into the water, the hiss of steam swallowing their cries. And yet, through all of it, the captain did not leave his post. He stood on the deck, one hand on the wheel, as if he could somehow steer the burning vessel away from the rocks and into deeper waters. The flames painted his face in flickering gold and shadow. Smoke curled around him like a shroud. The last the men saw of him, he was still there, eyes fixed on the horizon, as the inferno consumed the bridge. Within minutes, the Andes was gone from sight, swallowed by the waters of Deep Bay. But not everything that sank with her stayed beneath the surface. When the Andes finally slipped beneath the waves, it was not with the clean grace of a ship surrendering to the sea. It went down thrashing, groaning, and tearing itself apart. The bay churned with black smoke that bled into the horizon. The mast sagged like dying limbs, the rigging hissing as the fire met the saltwater spray. Flames roared even as the ocean tried to smother them, clinging stubbornly to the tarred ropes and splintered planks. The crew, those who had made it to the lifeboats, could do nothing but watch. The heat on their faces was almost unbearable, even from a distance. Each man knew there was no turning back, no way to reclaim the cargo, the vessel, or the captain. The bow tilted downward first, dragging the rest of the ship with it. The great steel hull groaned as the pressure built, rivets snapping like brittle bones. Water poured into the gaping wounds in her side, rushing through corridors, swallowing cabins, snuffing out the last pockets of fire in bursts of steam. And still, the wheelhouse clung to the surface for a few more defiant seconds. Through the veil of smoke, some swore they saw him, the captain, still gripping the wheel as though the sea itself would have to pry it from his hands. No fear, no desperation, just a terrible, unyielding resolve. Then, with a final shudder, the stern lifted high, the screws glistening briefly in the light, before the weight of the deep claimed her. She vanished in a boil of bubbles, leaving behind a patch of slick, oil-streaked water and the acrid taste of smoke on the wind. The lifeboats drifted in silence for a long time. No one spoke of what they had seen. No one dared to speak of what they felt, the sudden chill that had swept over the bay as the last scrap of the Andes disappeared into the depths. Below, the ship came to rest on the sandy floor of Deep Bay, her hull cracked open like a wounded animal. The water was still warm from the fire, curling in shimmering waves above her. Some of the cargo had spilled free, littering the seabed with half-charred crates, broken barrels, and jagged debris. Within the captain's quarters, untouched by salvage or time, the wheel remained. And beside it, in the shadows, something waited. Something that had no intention of leaving. The wreck should have been left to rot in silence, a grave hidden beneath the still waters of Deep Bay. But silence has a way of breaking. It began with the fishermen. Men who knew the moods of the sea, who could read the color of the water and the curl of the clouds like scripture. They spoke in hushed voices of an unease in the bay, how the wind would die without warning, leaving the air heavy and still. How their nets would snag on something deep below, something that felt like steel but moved. Then came the divers. In the early years, they were salvagers, searching for anything of value among the wreckage. They never found the rumored gold or explosives, but they always found the wheelhouse, and they never lingered there. Every one of them told the same story, the feeling of being watched, of something standing just out of sight in the doorway. One diver swore he saw a shadowed figure gripping the wheel, its head turning toward him as if in slow recognition. He surfaced so fast he nearly drowned himself in the process. Local law began to twist the facts. Some said the captain refused to abandon his ship not out of bravery, but because he had made a bargain, an oath to guard whatever secret cargo the Andes carried. And when the sea claimed him, so did the oath. They began to call it the captain's curse. If you swam too close to the wreck without offering respect, without speaking aloud your reason for being there, you risked his attention. Sometimes it was only a whisper in the bubbles escaping your mask. Other times, it was far worse, your equipment failing in calm water, your body dragged by unseen hands toward the open door of the wheelhouse. The fishermen had their own warning: never cross Deep Bay at night. Not when the water is still, and the moon paints a silver road across its surface. For it's then that a single light appears below, a ghostly lamp burning in the drowned wheelhouse. Those who follow it say it leads them in slow circles, pulling them toward the center of the bay, toward the grave where the captain waits. And if you look down into that dark water long enough, sometimes he looks back. The man's name was Aaron Vance, a seasoned diver with over 15 years beneath his belt. He had explored wrecks from the Gulf to the Bahamas, threading his way through twisted hulls and collapsed bulkheads without a flicker of fear. But he had never dived Deep Bay before. He came for the challenge. The stories, he thought, were nothing more than local color, tall tales spun for tourists. He wanted photographs, proof of how myths grow out of nothing but saltwater and shadows. The day was perfect for it. The water was calm, the sun strong enough to send golden shafts piercing through the bay. He strapped on his gear, checked his gauges twice, and slipped beneath the surface. At first, the descent was serene. Small fish darted between strands of swaying seagrass. The water cooled as he went deeper, the sunlight dimming to a greenish haze. Then the shape appeared, dark and massive below, the bones of the Andes lying at rest on the sandy floor. Aaron moved toward the wheelhouse. His light cut through the murk, revealing rusted railings and the torn mouths of open doors. The ship was quieter than any wreck he had visited. No curious fish, no shifting debris, only stillness. Inside the wheelhouse, the wheel itself stood in place, frozen mid-turn. A film of silt clung to every surface, disturbed only by his passing. He raised his camera, framed the shot. That's when the water changed. It wasn't movement, more like a presence, a pressure, as if the bay itself had decided to notice him. The temperature dropped so fast his breath fogged the inside of his mask. Something flickered at the edge of his light beam, just outside the doorway. He turned. There, half hidden in shadow, was a figure. Not a fish, not another diver. Tall, broad-shouldered, the outline of a man in an old-style coat, the kind a captain might wear. His head tilted slowly, and though Aaron could see no face, he felt the weight of his gaze press into him. The water around him thickened. His regulator hissed unevenly. Every instinct screamed at him to swim, to get out, but his limbs felt heavy, as if anchored. Then the figure moved, not toward him, but toward the wheel, placing its hands upon it, just as the captain had the day the ship sank. Aaron's vision darkened at the edges. In that darkness, he heard it, a low, steady voice, impossible to hear through water, yet they're all the same. "You shouldn't be here." Aaron bolted. He kicked for the surface, the light above him feeling miles away. When he broke through, gasping in the sunlight, his friends on the boat said he was white as chalk and shaking like a man in the grip of fever. He never dived again. By day, Deep Bay is a picture of calm beauty. Tourists swim in its warm shallows, children splash at the shore, and the distant shape of the Andes lies invisible beneath the surface, just another shadow among the reefs. But at night, the bay changes. The locals know it. Fishermen pack their gear before sunset. Even the most daring swimmers leave the water well before dark. For when the sun dips below the horizon and the first stars rise, the surface of Deep Bay becomes a mirror, black, glassy, and silent. It's in that silence the stories take root. Some speak of a single light appearing far out in the center of the bay, pale, yellowish, swaying gently as if hanging from a lantern. Others tell of hearing voices drift across the still water, not carried by wind, but rising from below, as though someone was speaking from the drowned deck of the ship. And always, the stories circle back to him. The captain, the man who would not abandon his post, who sank with his hands still gripping the wheel. Some believe he is still there, guarding the wreck like a sentinel. Others think he is searching, for the crew who left him, for the cargo he swore to protect, or perhaps for anyone foolish enough to join him in his eternal watch. On rare nights, when the moon is high and the tide is low, people claim you can see more than just the light. They say a figure rises slowly toward the surface, just enough for his pale, sea-bleached face to break the water. No breath, no words, only the cold certainty that he's seen you, and that he remembers. The next morning, the bay will be calm again. The sunlight will glint off the water, erasing the memory of what happened in the dark. But the feeling will remain, a weight in the chest, a chill at the base of the spine. And somewhere, in the drowned silence far below, the captain will still be waiting, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the next soul to drift too close. Because the Andes is not just a wreck. It is a grave. And some graves do not stay closed.
They say every haunted house begins with a dream and ends with a grave. Monte Cristo Homestead was no different. In the small railway town of Genie, New South Wales, a man named Christopher Crawley rose from nothing to become one of the richest landowners in the district. His fortune was built not on gold or grand inheritance, but on something far simpler, the railway. When the Great Southern Railway pushed through Genie in the 1870s, Crawley was clever enough to buy land at just the right time. He built a hotel for the workers, then a farm to feed them, and by the time the dust settled, Christopher Crawley was a man of wealth and influence. But wealth, in those days, came with a hunger to be remembered. And so in 1884, he commissioned the building of a 2-story mansion, lavish red brick, iron-laced balconies, and rooms large enough to impress even the most skeptical of neighbors. He called it Monte Cristo, Mount of Christ, a name meant to inspire respect, maybe even reverence. But if walls can absorb what happens inside them, then Monte Cristo was doomed from the start. Because for all its grandeur, the house was also a monument to shadows. Servants whispered of a mistress whose faith was ironclad but cold as stone. Elizabeth Crawley, Christopher's wife, was said to rule the household with strict religious devotion, demanding her staff follow rules that felt less like guidance and more like commandments. After Christopher's death in 1910, she retreated deeper into that devotion, locking herself away in the mansion for nearly 23 years. She rarely stepped outside. Instead, she watched Jeannie from behind her curtains, a black figure haunting the upper windows while the town below moved on. And when she finally died, the house did not let her go. Visitors to Monte Cristo swear that her presence lingers, pacing the halls, felt in the icy brush of air on the staircase or the sudden heaviness in the upstairs rooms. Some claim to see her outright, a stern woman in black, glaring from the shadows. It's easy to dismiss such stories until you stand there yourself. Until you walk the balcony where servants fell to their deaths, or stand in the stable where a boy's life was cut short. Until you feel that weight pressing down on your chest, as though the house itself is reminding you, this is not just history, it's memory. Monte Cristo was built on fortune, but it was sealed in tragedy. And that is where the haunting begins. Every haunting has a heartbeat. For Monte Cristo, it was tragedy, layer upon layer of it, woven into the walls until the house itself seemed to breathe it back. The servants were the first to suffer. In those days, a mansion was a world of invisible hands. Maids, cooks, and stable boys moved like ghosts long before death claimed them. One young maid, still barely a teenager, fell from the balcony to her death. Some say it was an accident. Others whisper she was pushed, her screams swallowed by the night air as her body hit the ground below. And then, there was the stable boy. His story is darker, more violent. A cruel master, angry and drunk, tied the boy to a carriage and whipped him. The punishment didn't stop until flesh gave way and the boy collapsed lifeless. Even now, visitors swear the stables reek of burnt flesh, though no fire ever touched them. But perhaps the most chilling story belongs to a little girl. They say she was dropped down the grand staircase, thrown not by clumsy hands but by deliberate cruelty. Her neck snapped on the tiles below. Today, guests climbing those same stairs often stop, mid-step, when they feel a sudden shove between the shoulders. A push from nowhere, as if the house wants to relive that moment again and again. And the shadows did not spare the Crawleys themselves. After Christopher's death, one of the estate's caretakers, a man with a fragile mind, was found wandering the grounds, clutching the body of his master's favorite carriage boy. He swore voices had commanded him, madness, or something else already stirring in the house. By the time Elizabeth Crawley locked herself away inside, Monte Cristo was no longer just a mansion. It was a mausoleum of grief, a place where each death carved itself into the foundation like a curse. And the curse spread. Even after the Crawleys were gone, those who dared live in Monte Cristo found their lives unraveling in strange and violent ways. Fires, deaths, a child struck down. The locals began to whisper the word openly. Not unlucky, not tragic, haunted. Because how else do you explain a house that feeds on sorrow and never grows full? By the 1940s, Monte Cristo had become little more than a corpse of his former self. The Crawleys were long gone, their wealth dissolved, their lineage ended. The once proud mansion stood rotting on the edge of town, windows broken, wallpaper peeling in strips like shedding skin. Locals avoided it. Children dared each other to creep inside, but most never made it past the gates. They swore that something watched from the upper windows, a figure, pale and stern, always standing just out of reach of the sunlight. Elizabeth Crawley had been dead for years, but her presence lingered as if the grave had never truly claimed her. For decades, the mansion sat in silence, feeding on its own decay. But in the 1960s, a man named Reg Ryan dared to take it back. He bought the estate, restored its crumbling walls, and opened it to the public. He thought he was saving a piece of history. Instead, he may have awakened something that wanted to stay buried. The visitors came quickly, drawn by curiosity, by the whispered tales of blood and death. And they left with stories, chilling ones. Some claimed to see a woman in black gliding through the upstairs hall, her face hidden behind a veil. Others heard the steady click of high-heeled shoes across empty rooms, always approaching, never arriving. One group of tourists swore they saw a maid standing by the fireplace, hands folded, her face blurred and weeping. When they looked again, she was gone. The staircase became infamous. Guests complained of hands pressing into their backs, of cold breath on their necks as they climbed. A few even fell, just as that little girl had all those years ago. And then there are the photographs. Countless visitors snapped pictures, only to find ghostly shapes in the background. Faces pressed to windows, figures leaning in doorways. Most disturbing are the images of children. Children who were never there, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, eyes wide and unblinking. The Ryans tried to dismiss it as imagination, as folklore. But the stories grew louder, and even they began to admit things they couldn't explain. Doors locked themselves. Furniture shifted overnight. Once, late at night, Wretch swore he heard footsteps pacing above him in the empty second floor. When he went to investigate, the air was so cold his breath fogged like winter, and he found a rocking chair, moving slowly back and forth on its own. Monte Cristo had been reborn, not as a mansion, but as one of the most haunted houses in all of Australia. And for some, the question remains, did the house ever want to be saved? Or had it always been waiting for more souls to walk inside, so it could keep feeding? Today, Monte Cristo Homestead stands tall once again, its white walls restored, its gardens trimmed. Tour buses arrive daily. Visitors file through its rooms, laughing nervously, clutching cameras, daring each other to linger in the shadows. To outsiders, it's just a tourist attraction, a historic home, a curiosity. But if you've ever been there, if you've ever stood on its creaking floors as the sun dips low and the light bleeds through the stained glass windows, you know it's something else entirely. The house doesn't feel empty. It feels alert, watching, breathing. Ask the guides who work there and their voices will falter. They'll tell you about locked doors opening on their own, about sudden bursts of icy air in rooms with no draft, about whispers that curl up from the hallways when no one is there. One guide swears she saw a lantern moving down the staircase, its glow bobbing softly, yet when she followed, there was no one carrying it. Some say Mrs. Crawley never left, that her soul still walks the halls, keeping her iron grip on the mansion. Others claim the cruelty of the servants, the broken bodies, the blood spilled in those walls left a stain too deep to ever wash away. Maybe every soul claimed by Monte Cristo is still there, tangled together in the dark. And then there are those who whisper something even more unsettling, that it isn't haunted by the past of all. That the house itself is alive. Feeding, learning, calling. Because no matter how many prayers are whispered, no matter how many renovations are made, one thing has remained the same for more than a century. Every single person who enters Monte Cristo leaves with a story. A shadow, a mark. And when night falls over the homestead, the windows still glow faintly, as though lit from within by something that doesn't need electricity. Something waiting. If you ever decide to visit, remember this. The house has been patient for a very long time. And it never lets anyone leave unchanged. Monte Cristo is not just Australia's most haunted house. It is Australia's most hungry. The Vatican at night does not belong to the living. By day, it gleams, a beacon of marble and gold under the Roman sun, echoing with hymns, the shuffling feet of pilgrims, and the endless murmur of prayer. But when the final bells toll and the heavy doors of St. Peter's Basilica close for the night, the air changes. The stones seem to exhale. The light fades into a velvety blackness, and in that darkness, the Vatican remembers. They say the White Lady first comes with a silence so deep it feels unnatural, as though even the ancient city beyond the walls has been hushed. The guards who walk the grounds speak of it in low voices, a sudden stillness in the Vatican gardens, a pocket of cold air by the bronze doors of the Apostolic Palace, the uncanny sensation of being watched. Then, without warning, she is there. A pale figure, barely more than a shimmer in the moonlight, draped in a gown the color of bleached bone. Her veil hides her face, yet her presence is undeniable. Some say she glides. Others swear her feet touch the ground like any living woman's, her steps soft as breath. No one agrees on the details, except for one, the sorrow. You feel it before you see her, an ache that slides into your bones, a grief you cannot name, as if you've just lost someone you loved, but can't remember who. The earliest written mention comes from a guard's log in 1638. A young Swiss guard, Matthias Kruger, recorded seeing a nun in white walking through the Cortile di San Damaso long after curfew. Thinking she was lost, he approached, but she turned and vanished before his eyes, leaving only the scent of lilies behind. The next morning, the Vatican awoke to grim news. A prominent cardinal had died in his sleep. Since then, the White Lady's appearances have been tied, curiously, to moments of upheaval, papal deaths, political scandals, even whispers of assassination attempts. No one knows whether she comes to warn, to mourn, or simply to witness. Some dismiss the legend as a trick of light, or the product of weary minds in a place steeped in superstition. But those who have seen her never forget. They speak of her with an unease that lingers, as though her gaze had followed them long after she was gone. Answer: in the heart of the holiest city on earth, among relics of saints and echoes of centuries, a question hangs in the night air. Is she a guardian, a prisoner, or a curse in white silk? The Vatican will not say. But the stones know. The stones have seen her walk. Every ghost is a story that refused to end. And in the case of the White Lady, her story began not in moonlight and shadow, but in the blinding, gilded halls of power. Her name, at least the one whispered in Vatican archives, was Sister Isabella di Rossi. Born into a noble Roman family in the late 16th century, she was sent to the convent at a young age, not for piety, but for politics. Her family had debts, enemies, and secrets, and in the Vatican, a woman like Isabella could be hidden away as easily as locked treasure. But Isabella did not fade quietly into the stone walls of the cloister. She was clever, educated, and, by all accounts, possessed a beauty that could stir even the most disciplined heart. Among those who noticed was a cardinal with influence beyond Rome, a man who dressed in crimson robes and carried the weight of both political ambition and dangerous desire. The affair began in whispers, a passing glance in the basilica, a folded letter left on a lectern, meetings under the cover of night in the Vatican gardens. Those who have searched the archives claim to have found fragments of their correspondence, letters not of lust, but of longing. The cardinal promised her freedom. She promised him loyalty. But promises made in the Vatican have a way of being broken. When their secret was discovered, the punishment was swift and merciless. The cardinal's influence spared his life but not his conscience. Isabella, however, faced the full weight of the church's wrath. Accused of tempting a man of God into sin, she was confined to a narrow chamber beneath the apostolic palace, a room so small she could touch both walls with her hands. There she stayed, weeks turning into months. Her only visitors the guards who brought her food and the priest who demanded confession. She refused to confess. She refused to repent. And one cold winter night, she was gone, found lifeless on the stone floor, her white habit soaked in the frost that crept through the walls. The official record says she died of illness. The guards who carried her body whispered another truth, that her eyes were open when they found her, staring at something no one else could see. She was buried without ceremony in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica. No marker, no prayers, no mourning. But the story did not end there. Within weeks, the first sightings began. A pale figure walking the gardens at night, a nun's veil drifting through darkened corridors, the faint scent of lilies lingering where no flowers grew. And each time she was seen, misfortune seemed to follow, a death, a scandal, a betrayal whispered behind closed doors. To the church, she was gone. To the Vatican stones, she had never left. Ask a Swiss guard about the White Lady and you'll get one of two reactions, a quick laugh meant to end the conversation, or a silence heavy enough to make you wish you hadn't asked. The truth is, for every guard who dismisses her as a superstition, there is another who has seen her and will carry that memory to his grave. The most well-known account comes from 1903, the year Pope Leo XIII died. 2 nights before his passing, a guard named Anton Keller was patrolling the Cortile di San Damaso. It was late, the kind of still, humid summer night when even the air feels tired. Anton heard footsteps ahead, soft, measured, almost matching his own pace. When he rounded the corner, he saw her. She was standing in the center of the courtyard, her white gown glowing faintly in the moonlight. The veil concealed her face, but he felt her eyes on him, heavy and searching. She raised a single hand, not in greeting, but in warning, and then turned away. He swore she walked straight into the wall of the apostolic palace, dissolving into the stone as if it were mist. 2 days later, the Pope was dead. Another sighting came decades later, during World War II, when Vatican neutrality was a fragile thing. A young clerk, Marco Santini, was working late in the archives. The candle on his desk sputtered, though there was no draft. He looked up and saw her, drifting between the shelves of ancient parchment, her gown brushing the dusty floor without a sound. He froze, terrified, until she stopped beside him, her head tilted slightly, as if she was studying the document in his hands, a diplomatic letter detailing negotiations that could decide the fate of thousands. When he blinked, she was gone. That letter, he later learned, was destroyed before it could ever be acted upon. And then there are the smaller, quieter moments. The scent of lilies in the Sistine Chapel at midnight. A white shadow flickering at the edge of a candlelit mass. The cold touch of unseen fingers brushing the shoulder of a guard before a scandal breaks in the press. For some, these encounters are blessings, a sign the White Lady is watching, guarding, perhaps even trying to protect the church from itself. For others, she is a harbinger, a living memory of betrayal and punishment, ensuring the Vatican never forgets the cost of its sins. Either way, when she walks, something follows. In the Vatican, there are bells for every purpose, bells to mark the hours, to call the faithful to prayer, to announce the death of a pope. But the White Lady rings no bell. She needs none. Her presence alone is enough to mark the turning of fate. The pattern is undeniable to those who study the sightings. She does not drift aimlessly through the Vatican's halls. She appears with intent, calm, deliberate, her steps leading her to those whose lives are about to change. And when she comes, the air shifts, thick and cold, as though the world itself is bracing for what's to come. One of the most striking accounts comes from 1978, the year of 3 popes. Just days before Pope John Paul I was found dead in his bed, a sacristan named Paolo Gaddi claimed to have seen the White Lady kneeling in silent prayer at the base of the Scala Regia, the grand staircase that leads to the Apostolic Palace. She was alone, her veil trailing along the marble steps. Paolo said she did not move as he approached, yet the air around her felt heavy, oppressive, and filled with the faint scent of lilies. When he looked away for only a moment, she was gone. 2 mornings later, the Vatican was draped in black. But her warnings are not reserved for popes. In 1990, Cardinal Bertini, a man known for his political maneuvering, was preparing to deliver a speech that would have shifted power within the Curia. The night before, while reviewing his notes in his study, he heard a soft knock at his door. When he opened it, the corridor was empty, except for the faint, unmistakable image of a white veil retreating into the shadows. Bertini cancelled his speech without explanation. A month later, he resigned. Even in recent years, her presence has not faded. Vatican staff speak of security cameras catching fleeting glimpses, pale shapes where no one is standing, movement along deserted garden paths in the dead of night. And each time, within days, something happens. A scandal, a resignation, a sudden death. It is said she does not bring the calamity herself. She merely arrives before it, like the first crack of thunder before a storm. But the effect is the same. Those who have seen her often speak with a quiet conviction. She is not there for them. She is there for what's coming. And so the guards listen for her in the stillness. The clerks glance over their shoulders in empty rooms. Because when the White Lady walks, it means something in the Vatican is about to fall. The Vatican is a fortress of faith, but it is also a fortress of secrets. Beneath the frescoes and gilded ceilings lies a labyrinth of corridors, hidden chambers, and vaults that hold more than relics. They hold the stories the church chose not to tell. And somewhere among those sealed records, if you know where to look, are fragments of the White Lady's truth. Archivists speak of a folder in the secret apostolic archive marked only with a single letter, I. It is never included on public inventories. Inside are brittle pages bound in faded red ribbon, their ink smudged, their edges singed as if someone once tried to burn them. The letters are signed by Isabella di Rossi, written in a hand both elegant and unyielding. In him, she speaks not of sin, but of corruption. She names cardinals who embezzled alms meant for the poor, bishops who traded blessings for favors, and deals brokered in candlelit chambers where holy vows were nothing but currency. She writes of the man she loved, the cardinal who had promised to free her, and how he betrayed that promise to preserve his own life. But most damning of all is her final letter, a chilling account of the night before her death. In it, she claims she was not ill, as the official record insists. She writes of a priest sent to her cell, his voice low, carrying orders she did not fully understand until he placed the cup in her hands. A bitter wine, he called it, meant to ease her suffering. She knew it for what it was, poison masked in sacrament. The letter ends abruptly, the ink blotted as if the quill slipped from her grasp. Some believe this is why she cannot leave. Her death was not the will of God but the will of men, and the church has never confessed it. Her spirit walks not to haunt the innocent, but to remind the guilty, and perhaps to wait for the truth to be spoken aloud. There are whispers of even deeper secrets. A hidden chapel beneath the Vatican gardens where her body was reburied in secrecy. A silver rosary found there during renovations, its chain broken, one bead missing. And carved into the stone behind the altar, a faint, nearly erased inscription in Latin. I forgive, but I will not forget. Whether the White Lady carved it herself, or whether it was placed there in her memory, no one can say. But those who have stood before it swear they felt the air grow cold, and the faintest scent of lilies drift through the darkness. For centuries, the White Lady has walked the Vatican's marble corridors, her veil trailing through candlelit chapels and shadowed gardens. Some believe she lingers because she seeks justice, others say she walks because the truth was buried with her, and until it rises, she cannot rest. But there are those, fewer and quieter, who whisper a darker possibility, that she does not want to leave. In the late autumn of 2013, a Swiss guard named Luca Moretti was stationed at the Porta Sant'Anna. The air was crisp, the city beyond the walls muffled under a light rain. At exactly 3 in the morning, he saw her, standing at the edge of the Vatican gardens, facing away from him. She moved slowly, her gown brushing the wet cobblestones, until she reached the bronze doors of the Apostolic Palace. There, she stopped, turned her head slightly, as though aware of his watch, and vanished. The following day, a scandal broke involving a high-ranking official, his sudden resignation framed as voluntary. But Luca could not shake the memory of that final glance. It hadn't felt like sorrow or warning. It had felt satisfied. There is an unsettling pattern in certain sightings, those that follow not only disasters but reckonings, moments when the guilty are unmasked. In those cases, witnesses claim her presence feels different, lighter, almost triumphant. If that is true, then the White Lady is not only a herald of tragedy but an arbiter, appearing when debts are about to be paid. And yet, for all the speculation, no one has been able to lay her to rest. Priests have blessed the gardens, exorcisms have been whispered in secret, masses have been offered in her name. Still, she walks. Still, the lilies bloom where she passes. Perhaps she is waiting for someone to speak the truth aloud, to give her name the justice it was denied. Or perhaps she has chosen her eternity, weaving herself into the fabric of the Vatican's nights, so the Church will never forget what it did in its hunger for power. For those who believe in mercy, the thought is comforting, that one day, the bells will toll, the lilies will fade, and the White Lady will step beyond the gates, free at last. But for those who believe in vengeance, the Vatican's silence is not her prison. It is her throne. And when the halls grow still, when the scent of lilies drifts on the cold night air, they know, she is walking again. Thank you for hanging around until the end of our tale. Every view is appreciated. If you have enjoyed it, please hit that like button and considering commenting and subscribing.